Hello and welcome to another episode of Oh and That's a Bad Miss, and I feel like this will be the last episode before we hit the peak of the season with the China Open starting tomorrow. Currently it's Mother's Day, Sunday the 31st. The China Open starts tomorrow morning, and yeah, we are hitting the peak. We've had quite a busy week, seeing that there hasn't actually been any matches since last Sunday. But let's get right into it after I do my classic Reddit plug. Reddit.com/r/snooker just hit 10,000 subscribers, so if you want to join a community of 10,000 snooker fanatics who talk about every aspect of the game and the podcasts, there was a good amount of discussion about last week's podcast on there, which has come into what I say this week. Head over there, give it a follow, have a look. Good place to chat, all things snooker. So, last week, where I left off, it was after the second session of the Tour Championship final. It was 8-all, and we were in for a good session that evening. It ended up going to 10-all after O'Sullivan took the first frame. Robertson caught up, O'Sullivan took the next frame. It was neck and neck, tit for tat, 10 apiece. Went 12-10 to O'Sullivan, so O'Sullivan only needed one of the next three to win it. Robertson brought it back to 12-11, but in the end, Ronnie O'Sullivan won the Tour Championship and therefore the Coral Cup, 13-11. If you're unaware, the Coral Cup is taking the three Coral-sponsored events and seeing who won the most money out of those three events. And O'Sullivan absolutely stormed it. I think he won around £280,000, and the person in second place was Judd Trump, who won £100,000. So obviously not even close, and O'Sullivan's domination of the sport continues. My God, is he on a roll. He's now world number one, which is the first time Mark Selby has not been world number one since February 2015. That's over 4 years. That's an incredible run by Selby. Shows just how dominant he was for a few years. The fact that this last year, apart from the China Open, he really hasn't had a good season, but how dominant he was the year before, because he's been able to continue to be the world number one despite Mark Williams winning the World Championship. Incredible. But it's over, and O'Sullivan became the oldest world number one since Ray Reardon back in the 70s. So, and it's not like this is his final hurrah. He's going from strength to strength in unbelievable play. If you didn't watch the Tour Championship final, I'd definitely say go watch it. It wasn't quite as good as the evening session between O'Sullivan and Trump in the semi-final, but it still showed that O'Sullivan's still got it. Obviously he's still got it. He's world number one, and no one's close to him now. He's the man to beat going into the China Open in the World Championships. Although obviously he's not competing in the China Open, he's the man to beat at the Worlds, which he's had a bit of a rocky relationship recently with, so we shall see where he gets to in the Worlds. I feel like if he gets to the quarterfinals, I could see him winning it. It's just whether or not he drops off in the early rounds like he's tended to do recently. Now, last week I was arguing that I still believe that Stephen Hendry was the best player of all time. I was quoting statistics like how Hendry has won 7 world titles and O'Sullivan's only won 5, and how there are a hell of a lot less ranking events back then than there are now, and that's why O'Sullivan has been able to win more ranking events than Stephen Hendry. Turns out, Stephen Hendry has participated in 216 ranking events, obviously now retired, while Ronnie O'Sullivan has only competed in 203. Because Stephen Hendry was a professional for a good few seasons more than O'Sullivan has been at this point. And if you've listened to my past episodes, you'll know I'm not O'Sullivan's biggest fan. But I don't think, other than the world title statistics, which is 7 to Hendry, 5 to O'Sullivan if you didn't know, 6 to Steve Davis, which is the top 3. There is no argument anymore, I don't think, that O'Sullivan is the best of all time. You don't have to like him personally. I personally don't get on with his personality, his sense of humour, as we'll get onto later, and there's some stuff he said, and the whole Australian accent, didn't really find that too funny, but it's just different senses of humour, different personalities. You don't have to get on with them personally, but I've got to say, statistically, I think he's the best player of all time now. My opinion has changed in the last 15, 20 weeks that I've been doing the podcast. So, yeah, what do you guys think? Who is the best of all time? I think that's something I'll probably delve really deep into, going back to Fred and Joe Davis, which obviously is practically a different sport back then, but I'll probably do a whole podcast during the off-season just for who's the best of all time in my personal opinion, because obviously that's the thing, it's always going to be an opinion in sports. There's never going to be a guaranteed greatest of all time. It's impossible. If you're looking for statistics like this, if you want to sort of read into it yourself, I was using Q Tracker, which on Reddit, a user for Riz pointed out to me, and he was quoting the ranking events and all the statistics, which helped change my mind. So Q Tracker, great resource for statistics in snooker if you're a bit of a snooker nerd like myself. Now, snooker's been back in mainstream media, focused by the BBC on both BBC News, BBC Sport and The One Show, and what a surprise, it's not positive, because it always seems that if Redder? I meant snooker and Reddit then. Snooker is in the news, it's always negative. And it's unfortunate, it's just the way it seems to be. But this is not good. So, Rebecca Kenner, who's ranked world number 3 in women's snooker, which, huge accomplishment to be that good at snooker, no matter the gender. To be that good at snooker, you're going to be pushing... Okay, so the equivalent of world number 3 women's is probably pushing the professional level in the men's game, probably pro-am, that sort of stuff. But she's world number 3, and she plays in a local league around where she lives, and 2 of the clubs have told her, you're not allowed to play. We have men-only rules in our clubs. And they have looked at her and told her, we don't let our wives in, so we're not going to let you in. And apparently they don't have the facilities for a lady player. I don't quite understand what they mean by the last bit. Facilities for a lady player. You got a bog, you got a snooker table, what else do you need? They're not fucking aliens, alright? You may work in some seedy little snooker club around the back of some alleyway, but that don't mean you don't know what a woman is. You're just another person. They don't need any special treatment. They don't need any preferential treatment. We don't need any preferential treatment as men. Just let them play fucking snooker. So, this got me thinking about the atmosphere within the sport, the culture. And I'm not one of them sort of really left-wing, ultra-liberal, social justice warrior sort of types. But this one did get me a bit rolled up, because it's a sport that obviously is founded in northern, old boy, traditional mentalities. I mean, you only have to go on Twitter and look at what people like Ali Carter and everyone's talking about Brexit on there, and it's infuriating. I just choose to ignore it. Whatever your political beliefs, a lot of people are very obnoxious on social media for snooker players. So I think there needs to be something done about the culture, but it's difficult because it is totally changing. It's changing something that doesn't have an easy fix, but that's life. I'm hoping, because recently there has been a push in the women's game. There has been an increase in quality. Last week I was covering the first officially recognised 147 for women. Huge thing. The women's game is still leagues below the men's, but it's getting there. And my local snooker club, Salisbury Snooker Club, if you're in the area, go check it out. Fantastic club. The woman on the desk, woman. And she's fantastic and gets on as a chat. Brilliant people over there. So it is possible. It's just these few seedy clubs that need to get out their own arse and realise that people just want to play a game. And it's not a physical sport. It's not like football. It's not like where you can't have men playing with football. What was it? The women's US football team, soccer as they call it over there, who won the World Cup, I believe, the Women's World Cup, played an under 16s American soccer team of boys from school, and they lost like 6-0, because there is when it comes to athletics, there is a difference between the male and the female body. We are naturally stronger, leaner, more built for physical exertion. But snooker, that's hand-eye coordination, that's not physical. You look at Mark Allen, you look at Sean Murphy, and you tell me that they're the peak of physical conditioning. You tell me that they're athletes. They're not. So why would you have women unallowed to go against the men? It makes no sense. In chess, you don't have men's leagues and women's leagues. And in snooker, at the top level, if the women were good enough, they're allowed in. Rhiannon Evans won a tour card, I believe, a few years ago. She lost every match. But that's just because she wasn't good enough. But there's not enough grassroots level stuff going on to bring up the women, because there's not as much interest, because snooker is seen as a seedy, sort of old blokes, working class game. This will be one I'm very interested to hear what you guys are thinking about it. It's been the same way since I was a kid. I remember BBC One during the World Championship finals or semi-finals or something. I remember them showing a bit of the women's finals, and I think they played it in the Crucible. And the women's prize money was nothing, and there was like 2 people in the crowd. And it makes you... And I always used to have that conversation with my mum. I was like 5 years old, and I was like, Mum, why aren't they getting as much money? And she said, well, because they're just not as good. And it's right. If you're not as good, people aren't going to pay, the sponsors aren't going to pay. But there is a push at the moment. We've got Rhiannon Evans, we've got, I can't remember her name, I apologise, I think she's Thai lady, who's an incredible player, who's won the Women's World Championships a few years running. But it's still not at the quality that it can be, and it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to solve, and whether it needs solving or not is another question. But just within this case of Rebecca Kenner, that needs solving. You can't have... I hate to say that this is such a cliche, but it's 2019. Men and women should be treated the same if there's no underlying factors. You should be allowed to go and play snooker in a league if you want to go and play snooker in a league, no matter the gender. If you're good enough to play against them, who gives a shit? Yeah, so leave any comments or anything. I'd like to hear other people's opinions on this. World Snooker did put... it wasn't World Snooker, it was the WPBSA put out a press release, and it was sort of nothing-y. You can't really say too much about that as a corporation. So they just said, yeah, we don't want people being sexist. And there's not really much they can do about it, because it is just a local league. Enough of that, I think. Otherwise it just gets me riled up. Final thing for this week is Ronnie O'Sullivan. He teased, one on Instagram, one on Twitter, 2 huge announcements, and everyone's like, okay, he's world number 1, he's just won the Coral Cup and the Tour Championship, he's skipping the China Open, he's on his way to the Worlds, what are these huge announcements going to be? And then he posted a picture of a sponsorship badge for the World Senior Tour, and implied that he was joining. I am 99% sure that's bollocks, because he himself said a couple of months ago in an interview that you can't have someone playing in the World Seniors Tour and in the main tour, like when Mark Williams won the Senior Tour, because they changed the rules a couple of years ago, a year ago or so, when the seniors started becoming more of a big deal. It's... if he does join the Seniors Tour and drops off the main tour, that makes no sense. So that's one announcement that was sort of a bit of a wet fart. And then the second one was a cookbook that he's made with a nutritionalist. Again, I understand he's into his fitness. I'm quite into my fitness. But, I don't know. I guess he's doing something to sort of change the atmosphere around snooker, because he's a runner and he does all his sports and everything. But, yeah, sort of... when you get all the fans hyped up and you say 2 huge announcements coming up, I'm back to snooker, I'm doing well, I've got huge announcements coming out, and it's like, one's probably a joke and the other's a cookbook, and I'm like, well, that's sort of a bit of a letdown. Thought I might have some more news to talk about, because I was like, if it's something huge, I can fill more time on the podcast. But no, apparently not. And I think that's about it for this week. We have the China Open starting tomorrow. Plenty of matches. Fantastic tournament as ever. Huge prize pool. The only issue, and it's the same issue with all of the Chinese tournaments, is the time. They often start like 5-6 o'clock in the morning in the UK, and when the UK is still your biggest nation for snooker, it's a bit of a shitter. It's a bit shit, especially I've got this week off work, and if you know me, I posted discussion threads on Reddit when I wake up for work in the morning because I'm a postman. So I wake up around 5:30, get this discussion thread sorted, and normally for the China Open watch a little bit while I'm getting ready for work. But now I've got the week off, not going to be waking up at 5:30, not going to get to watch most of it. Probably catch the evening session over there, which is sort of the early afternoon session over here. So there was a fantastic thread on r/snooker about what the Chinese were thinking about Ronnie O'Sullivan being world number one from a user who had access to all the Chinese social networks. Interesting, absolutely fascinating. Always mentioning Ding, lots about how O'Sullivan is great, but he'd be even scarier if he slowed down his play. Although obviously he's tried that in the past and he overthought it and couldn't string a break together. So yeah, that's over at reddit.com/r/snooker as ever. Head over there, check it out, see what we're doing over there. It's a great little community. Well, it's not so little anymore, 10,000 people. Seeing that we broke 7,000 people during last year's World Championships, that's a huge increase. That's over 3,000 people joining the subreddit in less than a year. Speaking of huge amounts of numbers, thank you for last week. Huge numbers on the podcast. Biggest one so far. Nearly 200 listens on all media, all places. Best interactions I've had. People giving me well wishes for everything I talked about at the end of last week's podcast about my mental health. That was really nice, you guys. So yeah, I will see you next week for a summary of the China Open, and who knows, because I feel like I wake up every day and I'm half expecting to see something random about the world of snooker that seems to swerve us all over the place at the moment. Yeah, so I will see you in a week.